Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Happy January. Happy New Year. We are so happy to be back on our show with you today. We have a lot to share with you, and starting with an incredible announcement. So I want Lisa to take it away. You are not going to want to miss what Lisa has to share with you today.
I am really beyond excited to be announcing this right now because we just found out this morning that Teachers Give Teachers is back. And it is open for the very first time. Like, I woke up this morning and went straight to HyperDocs.co, and on our front page, we have it announced, Teachers Give Teachers is back. And I have a call to action for all of you who are excited about this news as well. First of all, to get there, go to HyperDocs.co. When you're there, you'll see this front landing page. Now, you also can go to Find HyperDocs, and that will take you directly there as well. But if you want to, you can search lessons right here, and you can use it by doing a tag. So you can either type in for a specific lesson, or you could search by the tags down the side over here. I'm searching for one right now for math, and you could search for different subjects. You can search for different grade levels, and then you can just click on the, oops, I'm sorry, I just did a little back button there. You could click apply filters, and it will pull up the lessons that are for that. Now, if you click preview for that lesson, there it is located. And it's, you guys, anyone who's on the old Teachers Give Teachers sites, we're so excited by all these additional features with the filters. If you like this lesson, you can preview it here first before you make a copy. So there is a make a copy button, which has always been like, we wanted t-shirts that said file make a copy of HyperDocs. So if you'd like that, you can see the tags, short descriptions. There's so much that you can search for on here, but I have a call to action for you. We need your help. If you are excited that Teachers Give Teachers is back, then we need you to go to your drive and find your very favorite HyperDoc and go to HyperDocs.co. And when you're there, go into search lessons, and instead of just searching, upload a lesson. And you can fill out these drop-down menus, to the best you can. The type, is it going to be a multimedia text set or a HyperDoc? We're differentiating the differences. Give us your description. Choose a thumbnail image that best would fit in what category it would fit in so people can find your lesson. When in doubt, there's a middle school, high school, there's a secondary, elementary that might help you narrow down. We want it to be a published lesson. When you type in your ideal grade level, you can type in many grade levels. So you can say second grade, third grade, fourth grade. So put in all options that might work for you. And same with subject. So if we want to type in history, you could type in all of those. And these are all tags that will show up. Be sure that when you do this, you will also have to click that you are agreeing to our privacy policy. And we encourage you to click here and read our privacy policy, our user agreement, that we do not sell HyperDocs, that these are copyright-free products, or you've given credit to the original authors. That is our one ask. So sorry, guys, my long explanation there. We need lessons back into this amazing portal that is open for everyone to use for free. Just go to hyperdocs.co. Woo!
It's really so exciting. I mean, it's really not only is it back, but it's improved and super, I think, teacher user friendly. This has been a labor of love for us for a couple years. So to see the remix making its big debut in 2021, it's very, very exciting. Yeah. So we hope you guys will join us by adding some lessons to build this bank. We've seen such incredible lessons created over the last couple years. So we hope you'll join us in uploading some lessons.
And if you're watching us today, I hope you've benefited from creating a HyperDoc or seeing a HyperDoc that someone else has designed. And that is the heart of Teachers Give Teachers, that if you're creating a lesson and putting it all together for your students to engage them and you want to share it with your students, then why not share it with other students in other classrooms? So thank you to our team who organized this. Shout out to David Hotler, who's not with us this morning, but he was really purposeful in redesigning this for us. And really, you can go in and it's new and improved. And it's been about a year in the making. So we're just so happy to bring it back. And go ahead, Lise.
So many more additions are coming to it too. This is just the beginning of it being launched. We'll have features where this is really going to become the Amazon of free lessons that you can collaborate around in terms of users who are giving like reviews, starring ones they like, favoriting them. So if you have an account on our site, you can have a collection of yours. You could be leaving your remix of this. So imagine multiple remixes on one page. We have so many ideas that are still in the works. We just needed to get this out there for you. So
yes,
we're ready.
We have a wish list of what this, can be, and we're super excited to move towards accomplishing that. But in the meantime, we just wanted to get back to helping teachers reach as many kids as possible. I really think that's one of our largest goals, is how do we give quality lessons to as many students as possible. So the more you share, the more students you have in your classrooms. So thank you for making that happen.
Absolutely. And coming soon are features for liking your favorite designers, upvoting your favorite HyperDocs, socializing this lesson planning process. And remember, whatever you make a copy of, the beautiful thing about HyperDocs is you can remix it and customize it for those little humans who are right in front of you. And when I say little humans, I mean any student, any age in your classroom, not just little kids, high school, middle school. They're all there for you customizing your lesson for those people. And that just kind of brings us to our topic for today. And how excited are we, Sarah and Lisa, to have a special guest with us today. His name is Jeff Carpenter. And before he comes out, or as he comes out, there he is. Yay! Welcome, Jeff. I just want to share a little bit about Jeff with our community, that Jeff is an associate, a professor and director of the Elon Teaching Fellows Program at Elon University. He's also the associate editor of the Journal of Research on Technology in Education. And our claim to fame and connection with Jeff is that he is the very first person to do official research on HyperDocs, and he's going to talk to us about that today. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I don't know if there's any way I'm going to be as exciting as the news that Teachers Give Teachers is back. So that's a tough act to follow. But congratulations on that. That's a real gift that you've given to the education profession, and I'm sure a ton of work to get that up and running.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steph. We were very excited to see that come together. And as you know, as a researcher, we have seen the impact of HyperDocs in our classrooms, and we've shared our stories. But the research that you've done on HyperDocs is helping us to reflect and grow even more as a community. So we're really hoping today that you can talk to us about what your process was and your discoveries through your journeys of doing some research around HyperDocs. So let's just start with the title of your paper, Transformative Instruction, Old Wine in New Skins. That's the question. What do you think? Can you share a first takeaway for that?
Yeah, well, so first thing I should say is that this is not exclusively my research. So I have co-authors, Tori Trust, who is at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Tim Green, who's at Cal State Fullerton. And Tim was trying to join us today, but is unable to. And so I've got to sort of represent the group's work. But it was definitely a collaborative effort. And so, yeah, it was a fun research process in particular. Sometimes sometimes education research data, the data you get is challenging or tough. And there was a lot of really positive data in this data set. And so that was nice. So how this sort of study happened is in part because basically my main area of research is teacher learning, and in particular, teacher learning via social media. And so I spend time on social media, sort of watching what teachers are doing with it, what they're talking about. And I just happened to notice people talking about HyperDocs, and I didn't know what a HyperDoc was. And then I happened to be in a classroom for a different study. I was observing in a classroom for a study on the global read aloud. So Kelly, I don't know if you know Pernille Ripp and the global read aloud. Yeah, so I was doing some research on the global read aloud, and lo and behold, the teacher pulls up a HyperDoc. This was for PAX, so a couple of years ago when PAX was one of the books. And so I was like, oh, I've heard about these HyperDocs things on Twitter, and here's one. And so now I got to see it in action in a classroom. And so it piqued my curiosity. And then Tim, being out in California where he is, he knows you all, and I had done a little bit of research with him on another project, and I've worked with Tori a lot on the teacher learning via technology research. So we got together and said, why don't we see kind of what this HyperDoc thing is about? And then I reached out to Lisa, and you all graciously were willing to help us conceptualize the research and get it out in front of HyperDoc users. So this research wouldn't have happened without your help. So thank you for your assistance. But yeah, so we disseminated a survey about HyperDocs. 261 educators responded, and we did some qualitative and quantitative analysis of what people said. We also had people submit an example of a HyperDoc that they felt was well designed and they had used, and we analyzed 62 of those. And so that was a little bit of the process, and I can dive into the findings unless you want to ask a few questions before I get to that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing the background. I mean, HyperDocs are great digital lessons, but we know as a community that they're being delivered differently in different classrooms. They're being designed differently. And the big thing about HyperDocs is that the craft of the teacher is coming out. So it really does vary because number one, our school systems are so different across the globe and our community is global. Number two, our classrooms are so different. But what we've tried to do is ground that work in some foundational things that we want to see in classrooms. And that's what you guys really dove into, which we really appreciated seeing that input and that feedback back around that. So before we dive into the conclusions, let me just recap. And Sarah, if you could show my screen really quickly, because this was shared at ITSE this summer when Tori shared her findings at one of the sessions. And so the research study, for those of you watching, I believe had these 3 questions. How do educators conceptualize HyperDocs? How do educators use HyperDocs in their practice? And why are they using HyperDocs? And that's what you guys were really diving into. Can you talk a little bit about the process of choosing these inquiry questions, or what were you hoping to gain, or how did you begin here?
Yeah, so this is what would be considered exploratory research. And so nobody had done any research on HyperDocs previously. And so we needed to just kind of get some basics from users to understand what it is that they think HyperDocs are. So HyperDocs are not, for example, something like Flipgrid, a sort of specific technological product that a company owns and controls. They are, as you said, there's sort of an approach to teaching and learning, and you all have encouraged teachers to sort of remix and run with the concept. And so we were quite interested in sort of, well, what will teachers do with that opportunity to sort of run with this idea? And then we were sort of aware of some of the chatter on social media in terms of how teachers or educators were talking about HyperDocs on social media. but we wanted to just get a little bit more kind of a systematic inquiry into that. And so the sort of how and why questions are questions that I use a lot in my research. And it's a good sort of way to just establish an initial foundation of understanding about what teachers are doing with technology.
That is a wonderful way to start, right? And I know that we worked really hard to help people understand it's more than a document with just links on it. That's probably something you've seen when you're searching on social media, or there's different perspectives that have been shared on social media as well around what HyperDocs are. Are they more than a web quest? We've heard that before. So we try to just address those things. So within the research study, you moved into your data collection and you did the online survey. And can you just talk a little bit? I know you had, 261 participants?
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's what would be considered a convenience sample. So we don't claim that this represents all HyperDoc users. It's who happen to respond to our survey. So research usually begets more research, and so one of the things that needs to happen down the road is another study where you attempt to get a more sort of representative sample of teachers and see what they're doing with HyperDocs and what sense they make of HyperDocs. But as an initial study, we got this convenience sample. A lot of the folks did report that they had some kind of professional development on HyperDocs. So a number of folks had taken the boot camp that you all have run, or they had been exposed to some other kind of professional learning that helped them understand what HyperDocs were.
Okay, great. Yeah, so with this, I love how we have it broken down by who participated. We see a lot of this as well. A lot of classroom teachers, but probably the next subgroup of people using HyperDocs seems to be instructional coaches who are trying to help classroom teachers and support them in integrating technology either remotely or hybridly or concurrently at this point, or in a blended learning classroom. And then it's broken down with all of the other subgroups of people who participated. I appreciate the breakdown even more of the actual participants, seeing who had more experience in education, at least 5 years at 93%, and then a wide range of subjects. So that was exciting to see, because we do have a broad group of people using HyperDocs, and so the concept can be the same in any content area. That is the hope of really shifting instructional practices. So thank you for breaking all that down. You can see that on the slides that we're sharing. So let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. Can you talk about the conclusions and the analysis of the data that you collected?
Yeah, so the survey did ask questions that involve sort of checking boxes, or sort of certain answers that they could pick between. So we do some sorts of analysis with data like that. And it also involved open items where we asked and they could type in text. So different types of analysis for those two. We did statistical analyses. In this study, we did not find a ton of interesting statistical findings. So, for example, there weren't big, interesting differences in how the teachers used HyperDocs that related to their content areas or the relative poverty levels in their school demographics, things like that. So we ran a lot of tests and didn't find a ton of interesting stuff in the quantitative data. So probably more of what I'm going to talk about is the qualitative. So that's what people said and typed about why they used HyperDocs and how. And then also we did analyze those 62 HyperDocs, the examples. And so that was a long process. We were going through HyperDocs and clicking on links and thinking about what's going on in these HyperDocs. And so some of those HyperDocs took a long time to code, just an individual HyperDoc. But it was really good for us to understand better sort of what teachers were doing in terms of the documents themselves. And we'll talk more, or I'll talk more a little later about the fact that, you can see a lot by coding a HyperDoc, but there's also a lot beneath the surface that we realized we didn't see, or we can't see in terms of how the teachers actually use the HyperDoc with their students.
Right. Okay. That's so exciting to see that work in action. But for users who are watching this interview as well, we kind of talk about that in our professional development, how to do that yourself as well, how to take a look at a lesson and ask yourself, is it incorporating the 4 C's? If it's not, can you find a way to integrate that in? Another probably variable was there are parts of a HyperDoc that aren't on the HyperDoc. You know, you're not just giving it to students and having them work through it as a self-paced, independent activity. You're teaching from it. So depending on the details that the designer decides to incorporate, you may or may not see the lessons in between, the conversations, the discussion, the collaboration, or creative things that teachers do. Although we encourage you to include that part as well so that people can have a picture of what to do and what's happening in the classroom, but it's not always embedded on the lesson per se. So after looking at that, can we talk a little bit about your findings?
Yeah.
So this first question of how do educators conceptualize HyperDocs? What was the big takeaway here?
So at the time of data collection from these 261 respondents, I would say the big takeaway is it's a little messy. And so among the survey participants, they had not sort of coalesced around one real, clear, consistent definition of HyperDocs. And so, you know, that's probably part of the challenge of doing something in the way that you all have done it, where you do sort of put it out there as an idea, but encourage teachers to remix and run with it and adapt and things like that. And so you all have sort of put it out there in the world, and it's taken on a little bit of a life of its own in terms of how some teachers understand that. And so we did definitely see that there was not sort of this one definition that the teachers could just sort of roll out about this is what a HyperDoc is. And so that's an interesting finding, and it kind of gets at, I think, you know, the two-edged sword of maybe taking that open approach and that remix approach. There's a lot of strengths and benefits to that approach. Teachers get resentful when they're not allowed to adapt, when they're not given autonomy in how to do things. And so I would err on the side that you all have erred on, of sort of empowering teachers, encouraging them to adapt. But it does mean that it can get a little messy in terms of everybody agreeing on what a HyperDoc is.
Right. Okay. And for those of you who are wondering too, I mean, that it's when we did this research, it was before we launched our HyperDoc Academy as well. So one thing to reflect on is our journey of this community, where that was part of why we wrote the book and then launched the Academy, so that we could create a space that is more unified around what are the elements of a HyperDoc, of a lesson, when you go back to our traditional template. But what that looks like, it looks very different. And that's that creativity that we always want to honor and empower teachers to use as well. So moving forward, the second question was, how are educators using HyperDocs in their classrooms? So what were your findings there?
Yeah, and first off, this is the numbers here are the quantitative numbers. These are things that the participants checked a box off, and so this isn't yet looking at the sample HyperDocs. But so these are just percentages out of the 261 who talked about using HyperDoc for a particular purpose, and we gave them a list of options. There was an other option as well. So student exploration of content was the most commonly listed, and then collaborative learning being the second most common. And I think that's going to be an interesting point when we talk about the sample HyperDocs, because in the actual sample HyperDocs, we couldn't find as much explicit evidence of sort of here's where the collaborative learning happens. And Kelly, as you mentioned, sometimes that is happening. It's just off the slides, but we couldn't, as we were analyzing them, always tell, okay, here's where the collaborative learning happens.
Right, and that goes to, you know, myself as a designer and other designers. There's also various ways that designers will create a lesson and imagine it in their head and then share the lesson and then find a way to teach other teachers how you delivered instruction with that. And so for those of you I'm just gonna hop over here really quick. On our website, our courses, when you're looking at it, kind of start with defining what they are, designing them, which is what is out there, and it's that lesson that is shared on Teachers Give Teachers or shared with your classroom. But delivering is kind of what we're talking about, how the delivery can be very different in different classrooms. And that's where those courses are available to kind of explore more into that. But I have to say, I was excited to see that 89% started with exploration, because we are talking about that all the time. And that one shift in instructional practices, I was proud to see that as a highest percentage for some shift in practices. So let's take a look at this here. Any takeaways from this other part of the data analysis?
Yeah, so again, these are the 62 sample HyperDocs here, and acknowledging that we might have just been seeing the tip of the iceberg by looking at the doc itself, but the collaboration was the least commonly evident. And so that was interesting because so many of the teachers had said, I do collaboration, and then it was harder for us to find sometimes. So that might just be something for folks to think about, is being very intentional about making sure they are including meaningful types of collaboration in the HyperDocs. The student choice that was meaningful, that we sort of judged to be meaningful, was also not quite as common as we would have anticipated based on how many participants were saying they included that. And then other pieces that we didn't see quite as much of were standards, learning objectives, or targets, or essential questions. So we just sort of pulled those as things that might be likely to be present in a digital lesson, but we didn't end up seeing a ton of them in the samples.
So this is our call to action. This is our ask now. And as you're designing lessons and sharing them on Teachers Give Teachers, consider how are we incorporating these things so that we can do what we sought out to do. That's really great feedback, Jeff. We appreciate seeing it in that way. It's so helpful to see that. So let's go to the third question. Why do educators use HyperDocs? This is a fun reflection. What's driving them to try it out?
So the thing that was most commonly mentioned in terms of impact on student was engagement. So a lot of participants talked about that their students were more engaged by HyperDocs than other modes of instruction. And so we had respondents say things like, you know, my students keep asking for more and more HyperDocs. When we don't do HyperDocs, they complain. And so a lot of excitement from using the HyperDocs. That's one group of changes, is the student changes. Teachers also talked about using HyperDocs because of how it helped them make changes in their pedagogy. And so the design process of creating the HyperDoc, a number of teachers talked about how it helped shift them towards thinking in more student-centered ways. I know the visual appeal element of HyperDocs is something that I noticed when I saw that first HyperDoc on PACS a number of years ago. So some teachers talked about that as well. And I do think visual appeal matters. Hopefully that's kept in perspective, though, and not sort of seen as more important than perhaps some of the other design elements that are probably more supportive of deep learning. I think your message about the 4 C's has gotten through to teachers pretty consistently. So, and at least in terms of how they talked about their pedagogy being impacted by HyperDoc use. The 4 C's did keep coming up. And then we had some also encouraging and positive data from the participants just about sort of changes in themselves. So some of them said they were just reinvigorated about teaching by some of the changes that they had made through their use of HyperDocs. And then other folks talked about sort of providing PD to other teachers on HyperDocs or being in a community of teachers who are all using HyperDocs and how that really was energizing for them.
Yeah, that's really exciting to see, that re-energizing of teaching. I know that this HyperDoc Facebook group that we're like sharing this interview on right now, I can open that on any given day and be energized by the conversations that are happening there. I also just love and appreciate that we have this willingness of people, you know, there's something that when you have the time yourself to sit down and really thoughtfully design a lesson, you know, there's certain days as a teacher where you're just getting it done, going through the routine, you know, but when you design a lesson or a HyperDoc and you've thought through, well, the kids are going to be sitting in this way and they're going to be turning it in this way and they're going to be designing in this way or collaborating in this way, there's a different energy when you're delivering that lesson as well that I think is exciting to see happen. And that's one thing we talk about this all the time. The HyperDoc handbook was almost called like the heart of teaching because we felt like that our own careers were energized by learning how to design and deliver instruction with a HyperDoc in that way as well. So this is very exciting. So Jeff, can we just talk a little bit too? This is the beginning. We're hoping to maybe collaborate with you more to dive deeper into HyperDocs. Do you have any like thoughts on where we would go next, or what would you think are next steps for designers who are watching today, but also for future research?
Yeah, so there's lots more to be done for sure in terms of the research side of this, and excited to consider collaborations with you on that. Tori and Tim and I are about to turn in a second manuscript drawn from this data set that's looking specifically at sort of how teachers learn about HyperDocs and how they learn to grow in their craft of using HyperDocs. And so, you know, there's probably a sort of a trajectory where the first time you use a HyperDoc, you don't hit a home run, right? So any new teaching model that you use, the first time you do it, there's often some bumps. And so we're interested in sort of like, what's the process by which teachers figure out how to get better, figure out how to deepen their use of HyperDocs to include more of the 4 C's, et cetera. So that's one thing we've already got in the works. And hopefully that will breeze through the peer review process and we'll be able to share that before too long. And then I think something that we really want to do from our end is follow up with some of the survey participants and interview them to try and get below the surface to the tip of the iceberg and talk with them about, okay, so you shared this sample HyperDoc. Can you now talk through with us sort of how you would actually use it with your students? So what's some of the decision making that's going on behind the scenes? Because we do need to understand at greater depth sort of how HyperDocs actually get used in classrooms with students. So that's something we're interested in following up on, and we don't feel like we have a great understanding yet by any means in that area. I would love to get into some classrooms and watch teachers using HyperDocs, be a fly on the wall. In person, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But maybe some maybe, you know, I'm guessing, I'm curious, Kelly, I mean, are you all hearing that due to the pandemic, HyperDocs are being used more, given that they're digital lessons?
I don't have it as a researcher. I would feel silly. I don't have the official data on that, but my gut tells me that they are. Our Facebook group has like more than doubled in numbers. You know, as far as people collaborating, people purchasing our book, participating in our courses, completely has grown in the past year. And one of the things that's been really, truly exciting is when we first wrote the book, we addressed that HyperDocs can be a solution for distance learning and remote learning, and now concurrent instruction as well. As a lot of classrooms and schools are considering having to do some sort of a hybrid model, keeping your digital lesson where you deliver from for students in class, which we're calling the roomies, and students at home, the zoomies. That's constant, right? That's the way to keep everybody on the same page. And then you will build in your collaboration and creativity and critical thinking and connection through that. So HyperDocs, I think it's that home-based lesson that can fit in all of those models. And we have seen a lot of teachers using them in that way. So it's exciting. I want to invite Lisa and Sarah back in because I'm sure they are just listening in and really wanting to ask you some questions and reflect with you too, Jeff. So I just want to give them an opportunity to chime in here. Before, we also want to hear about your next projects as well. But let's talk about this one first. Oh, Lisa,
you're muted, my friend.
There we go. I was being so good to be quiet over here. I'd love to start, and especially, Jeff, because you teach in teacher preparation programs. And around this idea of, what is teaching? I know that we don't have time for all that today, but the craft of it, and how do we help teachers develop a craft? It's not something you can go out and purchase. It's not like a magic bullet you can find, oh, I found the solution. When we first did that, a lot of people misinterpret the definition of a HyperDoc, thinking it's a program or an app or something that's going to solve and transform learning. And what our goal was, and communicating this, and you know this as a teacher as well, how do we build that agency in teachers to see that they have that power based on how they design that lesson? It's a hard definition to share, though. I'm curious your thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, I think a big key is getting teachers collaborating, right? So HyperDocs, are trying to get students collaborating, but for teachers need to be collaborating around HyperDocs as well, and sort of checking each other's understanding of them, reflecting individually, but also together on HyperDocs. I mean, I think, it's a deceptively simple concept. So part of the reason I think you have gotten traction with HyperDocs is because someone can sort of look at it and just it logically makes sense, right? Like a slide deck or a Google Doc is something they're familiar with. Probably some of them did experience maybe a web quest. And I'm not saying HyperDoc is a web quest, but like there's an intuitive entry point for HyperDocs. But there's so much depth beyond that teachers maybe have to kind of push past that initial understanding of what it is and really reflect on how they're using to kind of get to that transformative model, right? So the title, going back to the title, to get to using HyperDocs in a really transformative way is not simple, I would argue, and is probably a journey that requires some iteration and time and friends, colleagues to sort of bounce ideas off of.
Well, and I think that just goes to my thinking all along is that this work to build your craft is not simple. It takes work. And so when you find a HyperDoc, and I find lesson design very personal, and very hidden. You don't know what I did beforehand. You don't know what I did during that lesson. You don't know what I did after. You're only seeing this one artifact. But if I could sit down with you and collaborate and share those pieces to it, I think that's a really important part. There's no simple answer. You're not going to go to teachers, give teachers, and find one and then hand it out to your kids and say, I'm done. That's where the work begins of you joining in. And that work is what can change teachers and the way they deliver instruction. It is that thought process that Kelly brought that up when you guys were talking, that thinking it through can change even the way you deliver it because you put in the thought to each, that exploration piece, that explanation. So I'm just, I put that out as a kind of a warning that we never said these were easy to do. The Teachers Give Teachers is there to give you a leg up on it so that you can not have to start at ground zero all the time. So.
But I love how the irony of what you're sharing, Lisa, is that it's hard work and it's personal work, but it's also, to get back to your research findings, energizing. And I think that sheer element right there is kind of what we stumbled on as well. And so although it may take time and an investment, even to take somebody else's and customize it a little bit, it still feels good. And it like really celebrates the creativity of the teacher and the fact that teachers know their students, so they need to make those adjustments for their students. And so although the lesson plan itself might be a product, it's that process of design and delivery that really kind of centers the teacher, which in turn affects the student learning, right? I love that the two kind of highlighted findings are that student engagement goes way up, but so does teacher energy and self-efficacy. So I think what you guys are really speaking to is like the HyperDoc itself is a digital lesson plan, right? You can, in its simplicity, but in its complexity, it's the teacher designer and the teacher and their ability to deliver a lesson that's personal and meaningful and, you know, all those things. It's funny too, I've just been listening in and thinking about how you're turning the corner into that next stage of research into professional development, because that was a big piece for us as well. And when we designed our academy, we designed it first in how would we define HyperDocs? That's like a whole course that we've built. And then how do you design one? And then how do you deliver? And so that journey you kind of speak of is something we tried to capture as well. So it's really neat to kind of have that professional research spin on what we were sensing from the community as well. So
reiterating that, Sarah, and I would just add one more thing, which is that when teachers share lessons with each other on a campus, I know people that are in the community are from all over, but when you work next to someone and you happen to share a lesson and they're in the classroom next door and they want to use that lesson, there's something that happens with that building community on campus as well, which is really just everybody working for the higher calling of education together, of public education to support the variable learners in all of our classrooms. And that's an exciting way to build professional networks at your small campus. We also have like a progression of a HyperDoc user, and we can drop it in the chat or we can show it really quickly. Sarah, maybe you want to speak to it because I know we collaborated on this quite a bit years ago when we wrote the book, but just understanding that this is a process to what we're talking about. And I'll drop it in the chat as well.
Do you have it, Cal?
Yeah, it's in my, it's ready to screen share, or you can, you see it?
Not yet. No? We call it the progression because it truly is a progression, and how we kind of think of it as like, even as like seasoned educators, we feel like we have a good sense of the craft, but then like a new web tool comes at us or a new device, and then you feel like, oh, I'm starting all over again, or a new curriculum or new standards or new, instructional practice. So we kind of wanted to honor the fact that even as teachers who know their craft, you still start from ground one again, and that's okay. Like sometimes you're just kind of like just crawling around trying to sort through something for the first time and like play with it. And my goodness, have teachers been doing that in the last year? And then that next stage is like, okay, I've kind of learned a tool and I might see how to maybe integrate that into a lesson. Now let me practice actually developing a lesson with the focus on the pedagogy, right? And then how can I tuck in the tools that maybe I've just learned, and what does that look like with the kids? And we talk about studying the students, do a lesson and then study your kids. And then that next part, I don't know why we can't find the graph.
I don't know, it's on my end. I don't know why it's not showing. I'll put it in.
But anyway, just of course, and you said it, Jeff, you said it, that transformative piece, like that's our end goal, right? Like we're soaring, we're feeling good, we've integrated, but we consider that transformative piece the collaboration in the community with other teachers. Are you sharing your lessons? Teachers give teachers, you guys. If you want to feel transformative today, find a lesson, share it, reach more students, reach more educators, because to us, that's sharing your craft, and that's maybe asking for feedback, things like that. Really kind of is our goal, is that we're all in this together. So yeah, we're just in this journey. We're never done, right? We're always working at it together.
Absolutely. So Jeff, I know that you have some other projects and research that you're doing right now. So before we lose you today, we wanted to just give you a chance to share a little bit about your current projects right now around how teachers learn and professional development.
Yeah, and so do y'all know the movie Up, where there's the dog, Doug, who like always is like, squirrel, squirrel. I'm kind of like that with ideas for research studies. So I'm like always coming up with more. Okay. It's like study. So I've got a couple studies going on. One which folks might be interested in contributing to is I'm doing one with Catherine Shelton from Northern Arizona University on teachers pay teachers. So it's an interesting, maybe contrast to the idea of teachers give teachers. But some of you who are familiar with HyperDocs may also use or have used in the past TPT. And if so, I'd really be interested in getting your perspective on the site and your experiences with it. So we're circulating a survey, probably going to close it in a couple of days about TPT. And so I think we might get the link in the chat for that. It's bit.ly/TPT study. And then the other one that if you follow me on Jeff P. Carpenter on Twitter or Instagram, I'll be sharing a link soon for a new study. The survey should be coming out within a month or so on teacher TikTok. And so I've heard that some of my fellow folks on this call love their TikTok. And we've been hearing that teacher TikTok is a thing. And so I'm going to be investigating on that with some colleagues as well. And so if you are a teacher who uses TikTok in any way, we would love to get your input to that study when it launches. So follow me on social media, Jeff P. Carpenter, on Twitter or Instagram, and keep an eye out when that study survey comes out. And I'd really appreciate your perspectives being added to that data set.
So wonderful. And honestly, it's so refreshing to know that you and your team, the various teams that you work on, are doing the research to help all educators everywhere to really study and know what works with kids. So thank you for your service in that way. It's just so needed. And thank you for being here today to share your journey with us in HyperDocs. We just really appreciate your time, Jeff, and your energy and your awesome innovation and collaboration around this.
Well, thank you for inviting me here. I really appreciate the opportunity. As you can tell, I love talking about research. And sometimes somebody other than my wife needs to hear about it. And so thank you. And then also, again, a shout out to Tim and Tori, my collaborators.
Thank you, Tim and Tori, so much.
On it without them. And again, thank you in terms of your help distributing the survey. We wouldn't have ended up with 261 participants if it hadn't been for your help.
Thank you. It was an honor. So for those of you who are watching, we will see you next month with another guest. We will just keep checking our Facebook live stream, and we will let you know who that is coming up as we are making final confirmations. But we're here every month. We're here every day supporting you, and thank you for supporting each other in our community as well. Until we see you again, just keep creating, keep designing out there. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Take care.